Greetings, brothers and sisters. So, I wanted to continue with this Kim Kardashian. It's more about like the whole levels of the female aspect of abuse, right? Because we know about the male abuser that uses physical power, physical superiority, physical strength over, whatever, right? The bully mentality, the bully as the abuser. But what about the victim as the abuser? So I want to get into that. I've talked about that before, but I have new things to say about that. I didn't get time in my video yesterday. And so I'm going to cover a little bit more of the Kim Kanye stuff to go with that, because that displays this dynamic. And then hopefully I'll get to these comments that will bring all this back to the dysfunction in the so-called truth community that I've covered in recent videos. But let's start off with this guy, one Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for sharing your time with me.
Okay, thanks, Arnold. We're a little upset at you because you wanted to screw our freedom. Remember?
Screw your freedom. I'm sending this message through various different channels to reach my dear Russian friends.
He's got dear Russian friends. The thing about Arnold is his English is so bad. They have this in Russian, subtitles in Russian, but he also has it in English. Like he's speaking in English. They have subtitles in English and in Russian, right?
And the Russian soldiers serving in Ukraine.
Okay, because this is going to affect the war. You're this aging, joke of a movie star and governor is going to stop the war with this whatever tweeter video.
I'm speaking to you today because there are things that are going on in the world that are being kept from you.
Oh, yeah, that doesn't happen here in America. There's no suppression of information. There's no disinformation. Only in Russia this happens, right?
Terrible things that you should know about. But before I talk about the harsh realities, let me just tell you about the Russian who became my hero.
This guy and his Russian friend. So, Arnold Schwarzenegger was in the era. Remember, I've talked about this before. You can trace who the American propaganda machine is calling their enemy based in movies and TV shows and the villainization of people. So when I grew up, it was the Russians. When I grew up in the 70s and 80s, it was the Russians. And then the wall came down, and then it became Muslim, these Muslim extremist groups, right? And then, it then became domestic terrorists, and it's gone back and forth between the Muslims and the domestic terrorists in recent years, right? And then now it's the Russians again. And villains in these movies that Arnold Schwarzenegger made during this time period, him and Sylvester Stallone, they're often Russian, right? Demonizing the Russian people with propaganda to push for, the Cold War and all these things, right? And skew Americans' view of the Russian people and the country of Russia and their leadership, right? Until the wall came down and then it switched to something else. And he just, put this stuff out there with his crappy movies. And now he's all of a sudden got a conscience, right?
In 1961, when I was 14 years old, a very good friend of mine invited me to come to Vienna and to watch the World Weightlifting Championships. I was in the audience when Yuri Petrovich Vlasov won the World Championship title, becoming the first human being to lift 200 kilograms over his head. And somehow a friend of mine got me backstage.
And he introduced me to steroids.
All of a sudden, there I was, a 14-year-old boy, standing in front of the strongest man in the world. I couldn't believe it. He reached out to shake my hand. I still had a boy's hand.
He still had a boy's hand. Well, I hope you gave it back to him.
This powerful man's hand that swallowed mine. But he was kind, and he smiled at me. I will never forget that day. Never. I went home and I put his photo above my bed to inspire me when I started lifting weights. My father told me to take down that picture.
I bet he did.
And to find a German or an Austrian hero. He got really angry, and we argued back and forth. He didn't like Russians because of his experience in the Second World War. You see, he was injured at Leningrad, where the Nazi army that he was part of did vicious harm to the great city and to its brave people. But I did not take the photograph down, no, because it didn't matter to me what flag Yuri Vlasov carried. My connections to Russia didn't stop there, by the way. Oh, it actually deepened when I traveled there.
To crap on its people and demonize them in my crappy, action movies.
With bodybuilding and for my movies, and met all my Russian fans. And on one of those trips, I remember I met Yuri Vlasov once again. It was in Moscow during the filming of Red Heat, which was the first American movie allowed to film in Red Square. Now, he and I spent the whole day together. He was so thoughtful, so kind, and so smart, and, of course, very giving. He gave me this beautiful blue coffee cup. And ever since then, I've been drinking my coffee out of every morning.
Am I the only one that hopes that coffee cup gets broken?
Now, the reason why I'm telling you all of those things is that ever since I was 14 years old, I've had nothing but affections and respect for the people of Russia.
You said you didn't care what flag he was. You just liked him because he was strong.
The strength and the heart of the Russian people have always inspired me. And that is why I hope that you will let me tell you the truth.
Arnold Schwarzenegger is finally going to tell you the truth
about the war in Ukraine and what is happening there. No one likes to hear something critical of the government.
Where were you during the illegal wars that happened? America launched in the last, 20 years or so, right? I mean, these were the wars in Iraq that went unjustified wars where they didn't have Saddam Hussein. It was proven he didn't have weapons of mass destruction. And Cheney and Colin Powell. I mean, Cheney put Colin Powell up in front of the UN to lie about weapons of mass destruction that turned out not to be true, and pressured all these governments, the Bush administration, go to war in Iraq and killed 1 million innocent civilians. Where were you? Because you were a movie star then, relevant then, and, the governor during that period of time. Turned out the Iraq war was false. Afghanistan war also false, right? They eventually made up this BS story about the leader getting, SEAL Team 6th in Pakistan, and then all the members who were part of that died in a helicopter crash, and that was wicked suspicious. Where were you then? To tell truth to a government that you're a part of here, when you were governor and when you were a movie star, and people actually listened to you and thought that you were relevant before you wanted to take our freedoms, right?
Screw your freedom.
Over some disinformation campaign that we all know about, like us in the truth community know about, right? And so this guy wasn't there for any of these illegal wars, and then the wars in Libya that took out a popular and a good leader in Gaddafi, and then trying to do regime change in Syria and Iran. Like, where were you talking truth to the American people that might listen to you, not Russian people who are, whatever their, opinion of you and the situation is here. Where were you talking truth, right? This clown.
And I understand that. But as a longtime friend of the Russian people, I hope that you will hear what I have to say. And may I remind you that I speak with the same heartfelt concern as I spoke to the American people when there was an attempted insurrection on January 6th last year, when a wild crowd was storming the US Capitol, trying to overthrow our government. You see, there are moments like this that are so wrong, and then we have to speak up. And this is exactly the same with your government.
We now know the Afghanistan-Iraq wars were a complete debacle. We know that they were lied to get to those wars. We know all these things, right? And you said nothing about those things that, murdered millions of people, and it's just the suffering that it's caused, destroying their infrastructure, their government.
I know that your government has told you that this is a war to denazify Ukraine. Denazify Ukraine? This is not true. Ukraine is a country with a Jewish president, I might add, whose father's 3 brothers were all murdered by the Nazis.
What are the odds of that? The reason that they're told that there was a war here was because the Ukraine joining NATO would be horrific for Russia and would be the end of the Russian, whatever it is, sovereignty, because Russia couldn't stand against the military force that would be surrounding them, right?
You see, Ukraine did not start this war. Neither did nationalists or Nazis. Those in power in the Kremlin started this war.
Look at Arnold laying down the truth.
This is not the Russian people's war. No. As a matter of fact, let me tell you, what you should know is that 141 nations at the UN voted that Russia was the aggressor.
Wow, the UN. The UN voted. It must be true.
And called for it to remove its troops immediately.
There are 50 some odd nations, more than that are part of the British Commonwealth. And then there's the American-owned puppet nations, all a part of the UN, right? So the majority of votes are controlled by America and Britain, right? And the ones and the allies that want the good graces of these rich and powerful countries. And so come on, Arnold, just come on.
Only 4 countries in the entire world voted with Russia. That is a fact.
It's a fact.
See, the world has turned against Russia because of its actions in Ukraine.
Okay, that's enough of Arnold, right? He's just a complete tool. So I want to review the whole taking the high road. Kim Kardashian thinks Kanye West's Instagram suspension was fair. Kim found the suspension to be fair, but her reaction wasn't very dramatic. She didn't make a big deal out of it and joked that she needed a break for a day. All of Kanye's posts have been exhausting for her, though. And simultaneously as this is going on, Kanye has released an album. Netflix did a documentary on him. And so while all this drama, they have these fake rap battles where rappers have these fake beefs so they can promote their crappy music or whatever it is, right? Skim Swimwear is here. Shop styles for 2022. So during this period of time, Kim Kardashian is launching a swimwear, whatever. This is her Instagoal, right? So she has an Instagoal for now, where she's launching the swimwear. This is all driving attention towards her. Just dropped swims.com, and this is going to drive her sales, as well as her crappy new show has all this drama to go with it, right? And so this is, look at it. This is just fake. This is not all these airbrush photos. Look at this thing. Wow, they're crazy. She's crazy, right? Just a plague on humanity. I want to get into that in a moment. The whole Kim Kardashian plague on humanity. So I'm not sure if somebody sent me this or it popped up on my YouTube feed, but this is Kanye West fresh out of rehab. Remember, when he went to rehab and they dyed his hair blonde? He came out of one of these rehab reprogramming centers, which oftentimes celebrities will shave their heads when they either go in or they come out, or dye their hair blonde, or both. Cut their hair short and then dye it blonde. That's weird, right? What's she doing? Why are you touching his ear?
Yeah.
So if you want to look up.
This is my first time doing this. I'm not actually attempting to do good. I just...
they're not connected. This is not a couple, right? How do they have, any sort of, there's nothing there, right?
Part of the reason why I even thought about or considered doing this, this recording, what do you call it?
Look at her. They're just not connected.
Called interview. This interview is because
this is from the Kardashian show.
To the movie The Incredibles.
Why?
It starts off with the interviews. The superheroes are giving interviews. The wife got a big butt, and I just see our life
in The Incredibles
becoming more and more and more like The Incredibles until we can finally fly.
You would.
Yeah, she doesn't get that joke.
Are you excited for your fourth kid?
Yeah, I'm pleased. I stopped using the word excited.
So they're talking about their fourth child here. I believe his name is Psalm.
I'm very happy. I feel like the energy is going to be really balanced
The energy, it's really going to be balanced. It's good energy. She got good energy.
out. Saint happens to be one of my favorite human beings.
I don't think it's good when like parents feel like this is my favorite child.
I think
So he's saying, you know, that she does favoritism.
it changes. I mean, it's reality. I was my mom's favorite for a good decade, and now it's Kylie.
I don't think you should play favorites with kids.
Well, they would never know that. I'm
They would never know that they play favorites, right? And so, you know, because she takes the high road.
just saying.
Oh yeah, they just watch this. You'll be like, oh.
Look at these guys from Entertainment Tonight Canada. Entertainment Tonight Canada. Kids totally know when you're playing favorites, right? Like, what does she think kids are thinking? They don't know. They're totally oblivious to what's going on. I mean, they're going to grow up knowing. Like, they're going to know maybe, you know, whatever their ability to conceptualize what's going on, but they know, and they're going to know more as they get older. And it causes lots of problems, especially when it's the mom. So yesterday, this was said, I covered this on Ellen.
Want my kids to just see the best of the best. So I just try to, as hard as it can be sometimes, I do try to ignore it and just try to do whatever's best for the kids.
She's just so great. She takes the high road.
That's what I love about you because
Take the high road.
it's yeah.
Take the high road. Take the high road. Take the high road. Okay, so this became a talking point in all these various media publication, taking the high road, taking the high road, high road. Kim Kardashian takes the high road. You know, these are all stupid people that follow this stuff are seen, or all of us really, because, you know, it's there on a subconscious level, are associating this name, Kim Kardashian, and this phrase, the high road, right? This is a talking point, and it's simply not true. She is the low road, right? She is the ultimate example of the low road. This family of, you know, horrible people are just, and here's her, this is just the, you know, her pictured on Ellen, which is about defining this narrative that she said she cared nothing about. So I wanted to start off with this, right? I would wonder, and people can comment on this, I mean, you know, they're going to do it anyway, but, you know, just something for each person to think about. What's worse for you, getting your ass kicked or getting your heart broken, right? Like, what do you think is worse, right? So when you think about, okay, torture, you know, physical torture, extreme physical torture, or having your heart broken in the worst possible way, like, which is something that leaves more of a, you know, PTSD and trauma, I mean, in terms of, like, you know, suffering and all these things. Because the physical pain suffered in abuse, an abusive relationship, usually isn't as bad as the, you know, the emotional damage and things that are done, right? And for me, you know, I've been punched in the face and I've had my heart broken. Not really broken. I don't like that term because my heart isn't broken, right? My etheric heart, I do heartfulness. But what can people consider having their heart broken, right? By, you know, somebody who manipulated them, somebody who, you know, lied to them or cheated on them or all these things, right? It's the emotional effects that are usually worse. Trust issues, you know, just despair, depression. I mean, all the negatives that you get from, you know, emotional abuse, right? And again, you know, like there's extreme levels of all these things. But I think most people, if they really thought about it, would think that the emotional suffering, the betrayal, the gaslighting, the, you know, the cruelty, all these things. And, you know, women are better at that than men, right? Just naturally. Men are bigger and stronger. But men, you know, there are obviously sociopaths and men who are great at manipulating, men who are great at breaking hearts, and, you know, and you would have that more as a man who pretended to be in love with a woman and then cheated on her, or, you know, whatever it was, right? Won her heart and hurt her, or whatever it is. Or, you know, won her heart and was nice to her and then turned on her and used the leverage of having her heart, right, to win somebody's heart and then use the leverage to enslave her, right? Like you have pimps who are really nice, find some girl on the street and really nice, and then use her as, like cattle or something like this, right? In his harem. And so you have that. Like there's that level of manipulation from men, and men, can suck at that. I mean, be horrible people. And women have, they have a deeper level of emotional intelligence and development. Now, this comes from the Heartfulness Meditation, Master Chargy, talking about how women are all gifted with a higher capacity to love because they're going to become mothers. And so it's built in, it's natural, it's innate to them, where men have to learn to love. And so I think that the heart aspect and the hurt that comes from that for most women is worse than the physical dominance and these things, the oppression. I mean, again, each person has to figure that out for themselves. But women also are better on the emotional field of manipulating men, of playing men, getting men to do what they want. And sometimes it's a good thing, right? There are women who, in the ancient Indian tradition, this was taught in heartfulness, and even now, that women learn to lead from behind. Where in India the man walks in front of the woman, and as the protector in some cases, whatever, and the woman can, in very subtle ways, get the men to think that their ideas are the woman's ideas, right? And men often need to be led on a variety of levels, and women have insight to things that men, don't, and men often are resistant to being told what to do or whatever, especially in America. I mean, think of like the Homer Simpson, Marge Simpson dynamic. And so the woman leading the man from behind where the man's feelings aren't hurt, but the women see things, and with, a good woman who sees things as guiding her man and the family in the right direction, whilst, allowing the man to think he was the leader or whatever. I mean, that's could be a positive thing. But the negative thing is when a woman's manipulative and, gone to the dark side, hurtful, and, is able to put on an act and lure men in and then torture them in one way or another and get, satisfaction out of that, which is a lot more common than you think. The negative women who've gone to the dark side. And they put a lot of energy and time into their physical appearance. Like someone like Kim Kardashian, the whole Kardashian family, because they want to lure men in that way to them, right? They want to lure men in a, superficial way and then hook them, get them hooked in some way or another. And then just, lay siege to the man's internal world, right? Hurting them on a, feeling level and, all the kind of things that women are capable of doing much more than men because they just have more talent in that area. And they're just, they don't have the physical strength to dominate the man, but they can really get their hooks into a man. And any man who's had this happen, many of you listen to this, know what I'm talking about. Like I had two women I dated, the first woman I ever sort of loved, and she was a nightmare, like just, and she told me about it and I was too stupid. Like a couple of things, right? We worked in a restaurant, we were waiting tables, and our first introduction, like there was a limited amount of small trays that you take drinks out on, right? You have the big trays you take the food on, and small trays you take like the initial drinks out. And people were claiming their trays, right? Because there weren't enough of them. It was weird because you just, pick one up but there was a shortage of them. And she walked up to me and said, if you take my small tray, I'll cut off your nuts, right? And I said, okay, well, we won't be talking anything. But somehow that initial introduction, I forgot about it because I was stupid. And then, later on, she told me that the Glenn Close movie, Dangerous Liaisons, where Glenn Close just manipulated and wrecked all these people's lives. At the end of the movie, she's, all dressed up and she's walking through and everybody hates her and she's just beaming with pride. And this girl that I was dating said that was the ultimate for her. And there was other insights she gave me into her internal world where, she wanted to manipulate people and torture them and say horrible things, right? And she told me about it, but I didn't, understand it. I was a dummy, young dummy or whatever, right? And she gave me all the information I needed to know to get out, right? I mean, all along, and I just didn't get it. And so, but she was a horrible person. And then, of course, my ex. And there are, women who, and the men do this as well, who think of themselves as a victim, are always, they interpret what happens to them in the world that they're being victimized in some way. And those people are horrible to be around because ultimately, in their dynamic, you're either going to be somebody who's rescuing them from being victimized, or you're going to be an abuser. This is what I suffered through with my ex who, had this dynamic playing out and continues to have this dynamic. And so all of her relationships were either a person was a hero or a rescuer or a, abuser. And either one sucked because when you're a hero, it's just you're buying into her deceptions and illusions, and you're going out and attacking other people or, doing her bidding, which is bad for you because, my family, sometimes it had to do with the kids, right? And so, as a rescuer, I had to, look at the kids as taking advantage of her, abusing her, whatever it is, and, and chastise them or ask them to help out more. And, it just was bad for me in my relationship with them. And I really regret, participating in that, especially since I knew my ex was effed up, right? I kind of believed her story at times, but a lot of times I doubted it. It was like both things could be true and not true, at the same time. And especially with my daughter Anna, who ended up, taking on my ex's, dysfunctional personality traits and things. And they were always at war. They were always, had an adversarial relationship. And I was forced to take sides and things like that, right? Which now, of course, I regret. I just, I don't know what I could have done differently because it was just for the stability of the family, right? If I went against my ex, there would be, she would just flip out. She would have to have some sort of psychotic break or, some fake psychotic break or whatever as a way to control the circumstances. And what I'm saying here is there's a personality type that exists that, there's one of the things in the world of abuse is that there's something called the trauma outcome process. And it says that trauma goes in, you get traumatized and abused or whatever it is. And it's it doesn't say it in the model, but I'm giving my own interpretation of it, right? They say in the trauma outcome process, it says you can either, cope, you could find some way to cope, or you could abuse others or abuse yourself, right? So it's like a program, this is my interpretation of the way I view it. You get abused in some way. Somebody, does something horrible to you, and it's like they've injected some sort of poison into your system. And it's like a poison of hurting. It's about something that, needs to express itself through hurting other people or yourself, right? And you can find a way to transform this energy, just deal with it on a different level. For me, from doing the heartfulness meditation, this is one of the wonderful things about the heartfulness meditation, is that, I got angry last night. I watched this movie over 3 days. It was not a great movie called Stop Loss, right? And it was about, you remember this, that during the Iraq War and the Afghanistan wars, a draft is said to ruin an army. When you start drafting random people, young people who don't want to be a part of the military, right? They don't want to be, involved in the military on any level. They're against it, right? And you force them to be a part of the military, well, that's going to suck because now there's nothing, they're not choosing it on any level, and probably they're not suited to it. There's lots of people out there that would never make good soldiers. So the best way to get people to be a part of the military is through, winning them over someone, getting them to choose to go in. And that can be because Like in some cases, it would be like, oh, you want to go to jail or you want to be in the army, like something like that, right? And for some people, it's the poverty and they have no way out. And so the only thing they can do is join the military and get some training and whatever. And they think they're going to be able to leverage that into some sort of, job later on or whatever it might be. People who don't have other opportunities. And then you have people who buy into it because of family and patriotic views and things of their country. And so when the big event happened in 2001, a bunch of people, young people and their families said, all right, we got to go get those guys. They've attacked us. We got to go fight those guys, which was, sort of covered in this movie. And then there was a problem that the war went on in Afghanistan for 20 years and Iraq for 10 years. And they didn't have new enthusiastic young people who wanted to go up and fight the war. And so they created this program called Stop Loss, where they could take anybody who had ever been in the military and just grab them and say, you're coming back in. Like you're just, they might have been out for a while and they dragged them back in and they had to go back into Iraq or Afghanistan. Now, when you talk to soldiers, this is something I knew from my brother, especially modern day, the more, even more so. Then in the movie, they covered this. They got to Iraq and they realized the reasons that they volunteered to go to war had nothing to do with why they were there. And so we all know that now, that all the reasons that were for these wars, these, 4 or 5 wars and military actions that happened were all lies. Like we know that they're lies, and not just in the truth community, but the mainstream media has covered this, and that the wars failed. Afghanistan, Iraq, and Libya, and the intervention in Egypt and Syria are all worse off, and Syria not as bad, but still are worse off because of American intervention. So the countries themselves suffered, Americans suffered, and they were pointless wars waged on lies. And even this stupid movie, it's not a good movie, but it brought this back up because I had forgotten about it. And so the movie is about this guy who served. He's from Texas and comes from a family of patriots. And he didn't want to go back in because it was, BS. He knew it was BS, right? And so he's trying to find a way out and, of this program. And then the other thing is to become a criminal now, where you were somebody who volunteered to serve your country and you did your time, and then you knew it was effed up. You come back and you think you're going to be able to go and join the civilian population. And they say, no, you're going back into the army. And I was just thinking about all the lies because I've covered this for years and I don't know what it was, but I just was going to bed and I was angry about it, really angry. Right. And, just there was anger in my system, which I don't, there used to be a lot more anger than there is now. And, it just came back up. And the difference between me now and before is that I can have negative feelings and still have normal conversations and not, have the anger. People wouldn't even know that I'm feeling anger inside, right? If I had anger that went on for days, which it doesn't, really do that anymore, I wouldn't lash out at anybody else or, you wouldn't hear it in my voice. You wouldn't even know. I could be angry right now and you guys would not know, right? Angry about something else or just feeling it. And it just is going on in the background, some, annoying music outside or something or noise. And I'm not attuning to it. I can just let it be there in my system. And that's all because of the heartfulness meditation. I can have negative feelings or any kind of feelings and still go about and do my job and, focus on what I'm doing and not let it affect me or other people. And I'm not passing it on to somebody else, right? Where I get angry and then I, yell at somebody in the family and then they, I inject the anger into them and they inject it into somebody else, right? And so this is the trauma outcome process, right, that I was talking about, where abusive program is put into a person's system and they can find ways to deal with it. And ultimately, it's got to be gratitude. There has to be some understanding that this has something to do with a divine process. It didn't happen randomly. This is why my ex was never able to, she was dominated by her circumstances of her childhood because she never was able to accept that these things that were happening to her weren't random and she wasn't a victim, that they were because of her, her need, that God was and her soul were providing these things on her path, and instead of accepting them, chose to view herself as a victim, right? Which is all abusers do. And so if you choose to view yourself as a victim and you don't take responsibility for whatever has happened to you, no matter how unfair it seems, then you're going to, feel like resentful. There's going to be a negative energy, and you're going to have to dump it on somebody else in some way or another. And so for men, they have physical strength, and they can, be physically abusive or be dominating and things like this, and anger and force in these things. But for women, it needs to be, especially if they want to take it out on men, like women who have suffered at the hands of a man, or, a man has broke their heart or something, or whatever it might be. And they have a negative attitude towards men, and they just keep on pulling those kind of relationships into their life. They ultimately have to find a way to, through deceptive and subversive ways, manipulative ways, to unleash the negativity that's inside of them, the brokenness, the broken hearts, the broken, whatever that's inside of them on their, their male victims or whatever you want to call them. And so what they're good at, and again, this isn't just exclusively to women, you'll find men like this, but maybe you've worked with somebody like this. Maybe you've, a lot of times they have borderline personality disorder or some sort of personality disorder. And they do what's called triangulating. And that is that they talk to two separate people and they give different stories to each of those two people. Like, let's say they wanted to get you in trouble with your boss. So they would tell your boss that this person, that you do something bad, right? Like whatever it might be. Like you come into work late, right? And you say, oh, wow, that guy's always coming to work late. He's lost interest in the job. And then they do something like they call you and say the boss wants you to go do something, and so you come in late, right? Something like that. And so you think that the person's being honest with you, so you go do this thing, and then you come in, you're late, and the boss sees you're late, right? And now they've planted the seed that you're not a good employee, and then you're up for a promotion against the person that's manipulating, and the person that's manipulating gets the promotion even though you're doing all the work, right? You're compensating for this person who sucks because they're messed up, but the boss's view has been warped by this triangulation, right? Or it's like somebody talks to one person and starts a fight between two people by gossiping to both of them, and then, giving them bad information, saying, oh, that person hates you, and they're talking crap about you, and going to the other person saying, oh, yeah, they're saying this about you. And then they ask you to give your opinion, then you say something, they go bring it back to the other person. And now you're at war with another person who, you don't really have anything against, and they don't have anything against you, but this other person has warped this, right? There's a great movie, not a great movie, it sucks as a movie, it's hard to get through, but it illustrates this point. It stars that guy Aaron Eckhart when he was young, and he has a boss, and he gets the boss drunk, and he says, you ever want to just go do something where you and in this case they find a girl who has is a deaf girl, and they win her heart, and they're going to try to break up with her. Aaron Eckhart's married. I don't know the name of the movie. I could find out, but you could search for it it's not a good movie. But they date this deaf girl, and the boss, who's kind of small and weak, falls in love with the deaf girl, and they were both supposed to break her heart, right? They were just doing it to, winning her heart and then just dumping her. And this guy says, you ever want to do something like that? And, he does it. He breaks the girl's heart, and the girl doesn't want anything to do with the other guy who falls in love with her, right? And so the other guy falls apart and ends up getting demoted, and Aaron Eckhart ends up being his boss, right? It's really to the level of manipulation and misogyny and all these things, right? And so that's an example of a man being sociopathic, but women are actually more gifted in this area to, change dynamics in a manipulative way. And if you've experienced a personality like this who triangulates and, they just wreck wherever they're a part of, they make the world, that little part of the world a worse place. And there's all this drama, and they end up, channeling their hate and their negativity through other people. and they end up looking like the good person. They always end up having like a positive narrative, until people see through it. But, other people, they always are able to win other people over and convince them that they're the hero or they're a good person, and these other people are the villains, right? And the way the narrative goes now, and it wasn't always this way, obviously, right? But now it's this way, where men and white men, heterosexual white men, are considered the most abusive, the ones who are the bad guys, right? They're the ones with the power, and they're the ones who are the abusers. Very seldom are women being villainized, and like women aren't capable of abuse, but we know they are, right? Like just in a different way. So they're not, you're going to do it in a bullish, bullying way, an outward bullying way. In most cases, some might do that, right, who are physically strong, but a more manipulative, sort of insidious way. And we all know that exists. Like everyone's experienced this. And women bring the drama much more than men do. Like it can go, you have some, it's not all like goes along with stereotypical behavior. But across the board, demographic, there's a lot of abuse in the gay community, for example. Across the board, you can go from demographic to demographic and different types of people. And they all have ways of dealing with this energy, this abusive energy. And whether they were abused at one time, and everyone is in one way or another because we have an abusive system, everyone needs to learn to cope and deal with that energy. But the way they show the narrative now, it's men as the perpetual abuser, but there are victims. There is the level of victim being the abuser. A victim who is abusive in their victimization, constantly being victimized, constantly drawing to themselves, constantly demonizing other people, constantly, creating false narratives and manipulating the situation and gaslighting people. And you see this across the board. In fact, on a cultural level, that's happening with this principle where one side's being demonized and the other side is off the charts manipulative and twisted and mentally ill, and they're driving this agenda. They have the power even though they claim to be powerless. And I've said this before time and time again. Every abuser's got a victim inside of them, and every victim's got an abuser inside of them, right? Like every abuser was once a victim, and that victim is driving their abuse, and every victim has an internalized abuser that lives inside of them, and they draw that, that abuser in the external world to meet what's inside of them. It's one of the great heartfulness principles. Nothing can exist in your life outside that doesn't exist inside you. And so whatever exists inside you, you can manifest that in the outside world, but it doesn't exist in the outside world unless there's some reference point creating it in your experience inside yourself. Some scars and these, psychological mapping and, your ego and your psyche and all these things. It's got to exist inside of you. So going back to Kim Kardashian taking the high road, it simply isn't true, right? Like, there's nothing in what she's done professionally, the reality TV show in her life that you would consider the high road. There's nothing there. Everything is done for branding, to make money, to get attention. It's all egotistical stuff. She comes from the rich elite. She's, she was born into the 1%. She was pals with Paris Hilton. Those were her peers and people like that. Her mother's off the charts materialistic. Her dad was a Hollywood lawyer that represented OJ. And a big time, expensive, overcharging lawyer. And all those guys are part of an abusive aspect of the system. And they all, is a part of this group that doesn't know what real life is. Kim Kardashian didn't suffer the kinds of things that normal people suffer, her whole family. And then everything's about their superficial appearance, mutilating their bodies and airbrushing and using filters to make their pictures look better than they actually are, and in the TV show as well, to glamorize them and create a standard of appearance that can't be achieved naturally, and make younger women who look up to them feel insecure about their own physical appearance. It's also superficial. What's redeeming about their show? You can't watch their show and not be sucked in some low vibrational abyss. There's nothing that she's done that would say that she's other than the brand that they've given her and the fake way that she acts to try to create that she's the, taking the high road. And there's an identified patient, which I covered in the other video, which is Kanye. Of course, Kanye is already a known entity, but he's marketing his stuff at the same time in this fake Hollywood drama. But it's how it plays out in reality, right? There's a person who's good at manifesting and creating this false illusion about themselves of being the good guy, the hero. And then when you're in a dynamic like that, then you have to be the villain, like I suffered through this. And then at the end of the day, you're like, it doesn't matter what people think. I mean, certainly actions and consequences can happen that are unfair because of these types of, manipulating dynamics, and it's what everybody does. In a political election, each side is trying to present the other side as the villain and the problem, and they're the solution. This is how it always goes. And, for one, I'm just tired of the lies. I mean, I'll be grateful when the whole thing comes crashing down just to get rid of all the bullshit, right? All the fake narratives, all the bullshit. Only spirituality will save this world. It's paramount, definitely important for the apocalypse and the ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.